Hello, welcome back to the C programming tutorial session. In the last session we had gone through a new concept, that is the data type arrays. Generally the students have a tendency to understand what an array is. So today we will have a recap on the data type array. So we will have a recap on this data type array and try to have a more clear understanding by taking some of the simple examples and then programming. I will just show you what an array is. And how it differs from an ordinary variable when we consider either an integer, a floating point number or a character. As we know that when we talk about an ordinary variable such as an integer, we know that the integer is assigned with one memory location. Suppose we are looking into our memory in this manner and assume that the memory is a 1 byte memory location. Each of these memory locations will have an address. Say for example, you have 697, 698, 699, 700, etc. So when I declare in my C program, say integer num, suppose this number variable is going to be assigned with the memory location 697. We know the data types sizes that would be taken in the computers. Say if I have declared as an integer, then it would be taking 2 bytes of memory length. So here suppose this number is going to be assigned to the location 697, then it would occupy these two memory locations. So whenever I access the variable num, it always means that I am accessing these two locations and whatever the content within that content would be referred to. The same way when I say int list of 10, what is this? This is an array declaration. My array name is called as a list and 10 refers to the size of my array, that is the subscript or the index what I am talking about, and I am saying it is of integer data type. As we know, array will contain homogeneous data type. So that is why when I say list of 10, suppose this list array is going to be allocated with memory locations starting from 699, fine. So here 699 and 700 memory location will be my first element of the array, that is list of 0. The next subsequent locations, that is 701 and 702 would be my second array element, that is list of 1. So it goes on, that is the allocation of these memory will take on like this, that is an array will always be allocated with sequential memory locations, wherein the first memory location, that is 2 bytes in length, will be my first element of the array and the subsequent 2 locations will be the second element of the array, and so on it continues until it allocates the memory locations for all these 10 elements. So that is the difference between a basic data type such as an integer and the composite data type, that is the array. So array means that it is always a collection of simple data types. So that simple data type always depends on what data type we have chosen over here. Since I have chosen int, so it is going to be a set of integers, and the size what I have given over here, that is 10, it would be 10 integers that would be allocated for my array list. And at any point of time when I say list of 0, it means that it is always the base address. The base address. So, when I simply say list, that is the array name, I am always referring to the first element of the array. So, here when I say list, it means that I am talking about the first element of the array. So, that comes in pointers which you will be seeing subsequently in C programming. But as of now, you always remember that list of 0 is the base address, and when you simply call the array name, it always means that you are referring to the first element of the array. So, now coming back to the recap, we have an array is a data structure that represents a collection of the same type of data. So, here as you see, you have an array called num. So, this num is an array which consists of 10 elements, and it is of type data type integer. So, you have num of 0 to num of 9, which means that it is 10 elements. So, each of them will have their own set of memory addresses. So, let us not worry much about the memory addresses, because as a programmer we will never be bothered about the memory addresses. So, the internal organization as a programmer we will not worry, but as a computer science engineer we might need to know more about this. Next, as I had told you, when we need to declare an array variable, we have the general format, that is the data type, the array name, and then the index. The index over here while declaration will represent the maximum size or length of the array. So, as an example, you have int list of 10, meaning that list is an array of data type integers and the maximum size is 10 elements. So, all your 10 elements should be of integer data type. Another example, that is character num 15. Num is an array which is of character data type and which consists of a maximum number of elements, that is 15. So, when we are talking about the size over here, the maximum size is 15. It could be anything less than this 15, but not more than 15. And the third example, as you see, you have float hat of 20. So, hat is the array name over here, which consists of a set of floating point numbers, and the maximum numbers, that is floating point numbers, could be 20. So, all that would be a sequential allocation as you had seen earlier. Next, once an array is created, its size is always fixed, that is you cannot change the size of your array. So, when you say num is an array and say 10, it means that you have an array called num with 10 elements. So, now 10 will be fixed to this array num. So, this 10 will say the size and length of the array. Where? How do you access the element in an array is always by making use of the subscript or the index, which consists of an integer constant, or it could also be a variable, say I plus 1, I plus 2, etc., where this variable expression could be evaluated into an integer value. So, here when you say num of 0, it always refers to the first element in the array, and num of 9 always refers to the last element in the array. And you cannot have anything beyond this value. Say for example, if you say num of 11, it is a meaningless value. You are referring to some garbage value, but not with respect to the array called num. Then initializing the arrays, that is when you are trying to declare the array. So, here we have an array my array, which consists of 5 elements, and I could initialize it by giving the flower parenthesis like this, say 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, which means that I am saying my array of 0 will be initialized with the first value over here, that is 1, and my array of 4 will be initialized with the value called 5 over here. So, all the subsequent values, that is my array of 1 will be equal to 2, my array of 2 will be equal to 3, so on it goes on. So, here since you have 5 elements in your array, we are giving all the 5 values to them. So, each of them will be given its respective values. Another example could be, you are declaring the array over here, that is int student age of 4, which means that student age is an array name which consists of integer data type and a maximum size of 4 elements in it. And here we could initialize it later, that is student age of 0 is equal to 14, age of 1 is equal to 13, etc. So, we could either initialize an array through a single statement as such as this one, or you can later initialize the values in this manner. Another example where we have a character array. Here actually it is a character array. Character array could contain either a single character such as A, B, C, X, Y, Z, etc. or a character array could also consist of an string. So, here we are talking about the character array and assigning the values of a string constants. So, here as you see, I am saying character, days of week, and I am not specifying the length of the array over here. I have just left a blank, and I am saying the values of this character array could be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, so on till Sunday. So, what does it mean over here? I am talking about the character array days of week. Starting subscript will always be 0, that is the first element of my array would be 0. So, days of week of 0 will be equal to Monday, and days of week of 1 will be equal to Tuesday, and so on like this. So, here my character array will consist of a maximum of 7 elements over here, though I have not specified the length of the array over here. Look at this simple example where we have the age of a person to be printed. So, here I have taken a age variable of type short. Short is similar to an integer data type. Both short and int data type will occupy 2 bytes of memory locations. So, here short age, and then I am assigning the value 23 to age, and I am printing out the value of age over here. So, that is my program. So, whenever I make this declaration short age over here, what happens internally in the memory is, say for example, the memory addresses would be say 925, 926, etc. So, as I have told it as a short data type, it occupies 2 bytes of memory location. So, starting from 925 if it is allocated, then 925 and 926 would be allocated for the variable age. So, that is why since I have given the value 23 to age, that value 23 is allocated in these 2 memory locations. So, here what we are seeing, we are looking at an ordinary variable, how it is allocated in the memory. So, now let us consider how an array would be allocated with the memory locations. Suppose I have to keep a record of 4 persons' age. So, here I can have age as different variables, say age 1, age 2, age 3 or 4 different persons. But rather than having different variable names totally, I can always have a single variable name but within it I could have the values differently. So, that is why it is a best practice to make use of an array in such cases. So, here I am using an array called age, which would have a maximum of 4 values of type short, and I am assigning values to this. So, age of 0 will be 23, age of 1 34, age of 2 65 and so on. Now, suppose this array, when I make a declaration, would have been allocated with the memory locations such as starting from 925. What happens over here is the first element of the array would be allocated with 2 bytes of memory locations. So, 925 and 926 will be my age of 0. So, that is what we are seeing over here 23. And then in next array element, that is the second element, age of 1 equal to 34, would be allocated with 927 and 928 over here. And the third element between these two and the fourth element between 931 and 932. So, here totally starting from 925 to 932, it always means that it is one single variable, but this variable is an array variable. So, it consists of these many locations. So, that is why whenever I have to access an element in such a kind of variable, I have got to make use of the index or the subscript, which is enclosed with a square parenthesis. Hope you have understood arrays a little more better. And now, looking into another example over here. Here I am declaring the maximum size of the array in the earlier stages, that is by making use of the hash defined preprocessor. The details of this preprocessor you will be learning it later, but as of now I can always make use of a symbolic constant as I had told you. So, now max size is a symbolic constant and I am assigning a value to this symbolic constant as 5, and then I am using that symbolic constant as to represent the size or length of the array. Why this is more preferred is, suppose I have to change the size of the array, then I can simply go and make the changes at one location over here rather than making the changes elsewhere in the program, that is in many places in the program. So, that is in order to avoid inconsistency among the program. So, here you have short, age of max size. So, max size as we have defined it as 5, it would be taking as 5 elements. Then I have another variable called I, that is the control variable, which I am going to use it in the for loop. So, here what is it that we are doing? We are trying to input the value of 5 persons age. So, I am taking the values like this, and then we are trying to print the value of age. I am sorry, it has to be 5 over here, or max size we could have used over here instead of this value 20. So, what would be the output of this program? Suppose we are inputting values such as this, that is 5 values, because we had told our array consists of a maximum size of 5. So, we are trying to input 5 values over here. So, after assignment or after execution of this program, the values of this age variable would be assigned in this manner. Look at the program once more. You are reading the values, that is age of I over here, and then we are trying to print the value of age. So, your output would be this. Then many a times we will have a confusion that is how to refer an array element. Is it equivalent to an ordinary variable or should we refer it in some other manner? An array variable is almost equivalent to an ordinary variable, except that every time you are accessing an array element, you need to access through the subscript or the index value. So, to whichever array element you need to access, you will have to access it by saying the maximum number. Say for example, you have an n array element, you need to access it through n minus 1 because you are starting your array always from your 0 index. So, that is why, say for example, you have declared an array called price which consists of 4 elements of data type double, and you have declared or you have assigned all the values for this price array such as this. And now suppose you want to change a value of any one of these. Can we change it or can we reassign the value? Yes, of course, we can reassign the value to the index. So, here in the example, you are saying price of 0 is equal to 12.25. So, what is price of 0 in this example? Price of 0 is equal to 2.5 because that is the first element of your array. Now, I want to make a change of this value, that is 2.5 into 12.25. So, if I give this assignment statement price of 0 is equal to 12.25. So, after the change your array would be looking such as this, that is price of 0 now becomes 12.25. And in the same way, you can use your array elements in any of the statements of your program. So, as you see over here, if price of 1 greater than or equal to 3.0. So, what are we talking about? We are talking about the second element of the array called price. So, price of 1 is nothing but the second element. So, we are trying to refer to this element of the array. So, if it is greater than or equal to 3.0, that is it is equal to 3.0. So, some happening must go on, that is we are saying discount is equal to 10. So, if the condition is satisfied, we are making some other assignment. So, an array variable can always be referred or accessed just like an ordinary variable, except that we are going to specify the subscript or the index along with the array name. Let us look into some of the questionnaire, that is which comes into a student's mind. Again, that is we are going to have a reinforcement about what an array is. Generally, we have that question, what is the difference between an array and an ordinary variable? So, as I told you, an ordinary variable can hold only a single value at a time. But many a times we would require a multiple set of values which has to be associated with one variable name. So, that is where we make use of the arrays. So, an array is a group of elements or data items that share a common name and the same data type. Next, what are the conditions that must be satisfied by the elements of an array? That is, an array is a group of related items that share a common name. So, as we have told, suppose I take list as an array name. So, by making use of the subscripts, that is 0, 1, 2, 3, etc., we are going to differentiate the array elements, but all these elements belong to the same array. So, they share a common name, and all these elements are stored consecutively, that is depending on what data type it is. So many bytes of memory would be allocated for each of these array elements. Only thing that these elements are going to be sequentially allocated. Then an array must be declared before its use in the program. So, this happens even in case of an ordinary variable. when you use an ordinary variable such as an int, float, character, etc., before using them we always have to declare the variable. So, even in case of an array variable, we need to declare them before it is being used in the program. And the array size must be specified. So, whenever you are declaring an array, you need to specify its maximum size either by making use of an integer or a symbolic constant which is enclosed within the square bracket. And if we are not going to specify with an integer constant, then we need to initialize the array. So, if you give a blank square bracket, then you have to proceed it by an equal to with a flower parenthesis giving the values of the array. So, that means that your array will be of that particular size. An array can be initialized at either compile time or run time. So, that is what we had seen in the previous session. And partial initialization of array elements is allowed. That is, if you have an array which consists of 5 elements, you can initialize only 2 elements in your array and the rest of the 3 elements by default will be taken a value 0 in case of an integer or a numeric array. And in case of a character array, it will be assigned with a null character or a null value. Then the name of the array indicates starting address of an array. So, that is what I told you, always your base address, that is say for example an array called list of 0 will be the base address. So, if I say list, it is always the starting address of the array, which means the first element of the array. And each individual element of an array is accessed by a subscript. So, whenever you are using an array, a subscript is a must. Next, what are subscripts and how are they written? So, subscripts are nothing but the index that is used to access an array element, and each individual element is accessed by its subscript, which is an integer constant or can be evaluated to an integer. That is, you can have list of 5, which means that you are trying to access the element that is the 6th element in your array called list. Or if you have an variable expression, that is I plus 6, where I has already been defined with some value. So, that will be evaluated, and if it results with an integer value, that particular array element we are trying to access, it means. Then they are written or enclosed in a pair of square brackets, that is your subscript is enclosed always within a square bracket. Then what restrictions apply to the values that can be assigned to the subscripts? The subscript indicates the position of the individual data item in an array. That is, each array element you need to access through a subscript. And the array subscript starts from 0 to maximum size minus 1. So, always your first element will be from 0 and your last element will be whatever maximum size you have taken, that minus 1 it would be. So, this is your lower bound, 0 is your lower bound and max size minus 1 is the upper bound. The restriction is that the subscript must be an integer constant enclosed within a square bracket. So, it always must be an integer value. What advantages are there in defining an array size in terms of a symbolic constant rather than a fixed integer quantity? So, that is what I told you. If you have a symbolic constant by saying hash define max of 100, then you need not go and change the values whenever you require the array size to be changed. Okay? You need not go and change this value every time in your program wherever you have used. So, if you have used hash define such as a symbolic constant max 100, if you want to reduce the size of your array, you can just go and make a change over here. So, this symbolic constant could be used everywhere in your program. So, once you change this value, automatically your array sizes will be changed in your within your program. So, the advantage of defining an array size in terms of symbolic constant is that the size can be changed as and when required only once, not in every location it is being used. So, it is very efficient and it becomes a error free. If it is used as a fixed integer quantity, then it has to be modified at every location it is used. So, that would be more error prone. So, generally this array size is going to be defined by making use of a such symbolic constant value. Then, let us try to find some of the errors over here while we are declaring an array. So, coming to your first declaration, we are declaring it as int score of 100. So, what does it mean over here? This is the data type integer, which is correct. Score is any user defined variable name. So, that is the array name I have given, and then 100 is the size of the array. So, what is wrong over here? Is there any fault? Yes, there is a fault. Why? Because we told the subscripts of the array always need to be enclosed within a square parenthesis. So, here now I am defining the size or length of the array that should have been enclosed within a square parenthesis, but here it is a simple parenthesis, which is wrong. Next, coming to the second declaration, that is float values of 10. Float is a data type, values is a user defined variable name, that is the array name, and then 10 is the maximum size of the array values, and it is also enclosed within a square bracket with a semicolon at the end. So, this declaration is absolutely correct. Coming to the third example, double salary of max, where max is already a symbolic constant which is defined with some value. So, now a data type, array name, then the size or length of the array which is enclosed with a square bracket and terminated by a semicolon. This is a correct declaration. Next, you have int array x of 10. Int is a data type, array x, that is we have a space between array and x, where it is not a valid user defined variable name, and of course this part is correct, but since the array name itself does not confine to our standards, this declaration would be wrong. Next, you have float I plus max. Is this correct? We do not have an array name over here. Float is a data type. Following the data type, we should have a array name which is missing over here. The size of the array, suppose I plus max, it is an expression. This of course could be correct provided both I and max would have some values, but here since we are missing out the array name, this declaration is also wrong. Next, int number with the square parenthesis, this declaration also would be wrong, because in such a case, that is if we are going to declare an array in this manner, then along with this we need to initialize the values too. Since we have not initialized any values to this array called number, this declaration also would be wrong. Next, int list, again a empty square parenthesis equal to 0. Here we have a data type int, array name, and this is an array showing it within a square bracket always represents that this is an array, and we are trying to initialize the values for this array called list. So, here initialization of an array variable should always be enclosed within a flower parenthesis. Since we have a simple parenthesis like this, it is also wrong. The next example, as you see, that is the 8th example, that is float list, again a empty parenthesis, square parenthesis, which is right, equal to, and within flower parenthesis we are giving one value 0.0. So, it means that we have a list array which consists of one array element. So, your list of 0 will be initialized with the value 0.0. Next, what will be the output of this particular code? That is, you have a program wherein we have an array called ARR, which has a maximum length or maximum size as 20, and it happens to be a character array, and I am assigning some string constant to this character array, which is also correct. And I am trying to print the size of array. Size of is a special function which is going to give you, it is an operator which is going to return a value, that is depending on how many bytes of memory location this particular parameter requires. The parameter what we have given for this size of is the array here. So, since I am saying character array of 20, a character data type occupies 1 byte of memory location. So, at all times a character will require 1 byte of memory location. And since I have taken this array of 20 is equal to Mystic River. The word Mystic River, okay, consists of 6 plus 5, that is 11 characters, fine. So, my character array ARR will consist of 11 characters, and if I am saying size of ARR, it means that currently it has a value of 11 characters, but the rest of the values, that is as I have told it as 20, it would contain the rest of 9 characters would be a null character. So, your output of this program should always be the size of your character array that we have declared over here. The size is 20. So, it is 20 bytes. So, the output of this also should be a 20. Another example where we have again a character array, that is character ARR, and I have taken the maximum size of this character array to be 11, and I am assigning a string constant, that is the African queen. Now, if we count the number of characters in this string constant, that is the African queen, it much exceeds the number 11. So, what should be the output of this program when I try to print this particular character array? As I told you, a character array is always considered as a string. So, that is why we can use, or we got to use the conversion specifier for the string variable. So, percentage %s represents for a string variable, and when we try to execute this particular program, it ends up with an error saying that we have too many initializers over here, because the number of characters in this particular string constant is much more than the maximum size of our array. Now, what will be the output of this particular program? We have an array called array itself, and it is an integer array which has been initialized with values 10, 20, 30 and 40. And now, I am trying to output the value of certain element. So, I say -2 of array. So, what is the output that you expect from this particular program? I have not used any subscript over here, but I am referring just the array name. So, this particular element what we find is an expression. So, it is nothing but -2 into the array name. So, as I have told you, whenever we just refer to the array name, it always refers to the first element of the array, that is array of 0. So, here when we say -2 into array, so the first element of my array is 10. So, your output or your result would be -2 into 10, that is -20. Let us look into some more examples by trying to execute them. Here is a simple example to have more understanding of what an array and how the elements are going to be used. Just keep analyzing what has been assigned to the different variables over here and try to tell me the output or the result. We have this program where we have the declaration part, an array which consists of 5 elements over here and which is initialized with values 2, 4, 6 and 3, and we are saying a of 1 is equal to 10. So, what does a of 1 mean? It is the second element. The second element actually as per our initialization is 4, but as I am assigning some new value to the second element, so the second element now becomes a value 10 after the execution of the statement, but the first element as it is has to remain as 2, is it not? Next, we are taking another assignment statement saying that a of I plus 2 is equal to 12. So, what is the value of I? The value of I is given as 1. So, it is 1 plus 2, meaning that a of 3 I am trying to refer. So, a of 3 is equal to 12, that is a of 3 is the fourth element in my array. So, instead of having a value 3 that was an initializer, now it would have a value 12, and then I am trying to output the entire array element. So, now when we execute this program, let us check what the result of this would be. You got a value, that is your first element is 2 as it is, and your second element because of this assignment statement now has become 10, and your third element remains to be 6, and your fourth element that we have changed, that is by making the second assignment statement over here, a of I plus 2 is equal to 12. So, that is changed to 12, and the fifth element, as we have not initialized in our program to anything, by default if it is a numeric array, it is going to assume a value 0. So, that is what you are seeing, it has a value 0 over here. Let us look into the example of the partial initialization that could happen in an array. So, we have a program, a simple program within which we have an array of 5 elements and we are initializing with a single value such as 2 over here, and we are trying to output all the values of the array elements. So, what would be the output of this program? You have the first element that is initialized to value 2, and the rest of the elements, that is the 4 elements, because we have a maximum of 5 elements in this array. So, the rest of the 4 elements will be automatically taking the value 0. And in the previous session I told you, the array while it is being executed, it will never check for the bounds. That is, if you are going to specify rather than a 0, a negative value, that is array of -4, -3, etc., you will never come across any error. And even if you are crossing your upper bound, that is your array will contain 5 elements, but if you are trying to access an element such as the 6th element or the 7th element, etc., then also your program will never give an error. So, the bound checking is not explicitly done in your arrays. So, the programmer himself or herself should be careful enough to see that the bounds are followed. So, for that, one example, so I have an array A which consists of a maximum of 5 elements, and here in my program I am trying to refer till from 0 till 7. That is, my array consists of only 5 elements, but I am trying to access 2 or 3 more elements in addition. So, what will be the output of my program? Just let us check. For a clear understanding, I will initialize this array . Okay. Look here, we have an array of 5 elements which is initialized with 3 and 5 for the first 2 elements. So, by default all the elements in our array will be initialized. So, the values which we have not given will be initialized to a value 0. So, here till this limit, that is 3, 5, 0, 0, 0 are my actual array elements. Across this, as I have given in my for loop I less than 8, that is 3 more elements which are not a part of this array A, okay, also have been printed, but they are not part of this array. Since they are not part of the array, it is not giving any error to the programmer, but simply it has been considered. So, that is what we mean to say the bound checking is not explicitly done in the C programming when coming to the arrays. Let us go into some programming using arrays. This is a program to find the largest of the element, the largest element in the array. So, how do we find the largest element in the array? Yes, we could have followed several types of logic or several kinds of logic. So, one such logic what I am trying to follow is we have an array over here. Let us call it as list. It might contain say 4 elements over here, and I will give the values such as say 23, 20, 18 and 25. Here I am trying to assume that each of this is 2 bytes of memory locations. So, here you have 4 values within the array called list. And the logic that we are trying to follow over here is, first we will assume the element, the first element to be the largest, and then this largest element will next be compared with the rest of the elements, that is 23 larger than 20. If it is yes, make a change, that is this will be called as big. If this happens to be the second element happens to be larger than the first element, then we make this as the larger element, which is false in this case. So, next we will compare the largest with the next subsequent element, then we would make a comparison such as this. So, here this is false, this is also false, but here this is true, that is this element happens to be larger than this. So, whatever we had made the initial assumption now becomes false. So, I will be changing this variable called big to this one, fine. So, this is the logic that has been used in order to write this program. So, as you can see, we have an array which consists of maximum 10 elements and other variables such as this. And then we need to first input the array. So, to input an array, we make use of the for loop. And we make the assumption that is big equal to 0 and start comparing the other elements with big. So, my initial condition over here will start from I equal to 1, because the first element itself is the big element. And we compare if big is less than the current element of the array, then I need to make a change. If not, continue with the next iteration, that is continue with the next array element. So, now we will try to execute this program and find what the output would be. So, it is asking for the size of the array. I will say 5. So, I need to enter all the 5 elements over here, say 23, 56, 4, 3 and 12, and the largest element is 56. Okay. One more program example where we need to search for an element in a list of values, that is search for a particular number in a list of numbers. So, as we are referring to a list of numbers, it is a best to make use of an array. So, here this search could be done in basically in two different types. One is the linear search and the other is the binary search. So, here talking about the linear search, it goes like this. Suppose we have an array called list and it has a list of values such as this, say 23, 10, 5, 15 and 20, and my search element happens to be say 5. So, since it is an array, that is list of some number, so I will start comparing that this is my key element now. I start comparing this key element with each of these array elements. At any point of time, if the key element is equal to the array element over here, then I need to say that that element is found in this array and in which position it is found. So, this kind of search we call as a linear search. Why? Because we are trying to search for an element in a sequential manner or in a linear manner. So, the program for this could go as follows. So, here as you see, we have an array called A with the index max size. This max size happens to be a symbolic constant because we have told hash defined max size is 25. So, a maximum number of elements over here is 25. After that, we are trying to input the value for the array by using these two statements, that is for and scanf. So, at this point of time, we have an array which consists of n minus 1 n elements, and after that we are trying to input the value of the key element over here, that is the key element, and now we are trying to search whether that key element will be equal to any of the array elements value. So, again we make use of a for loop over here, that is starting from the first element to the nth element we need to make a comparison. So, if key is equal to A of I. So, A of I means that I am talking about all the array elements till this end, and we have made use of a flag variable over here, that is called as found, which is initialized to a value 0. So, at any point of time if this condition is met, I will change the value of this flag variable, otherwise the flag variable remains to be 0 itself. So, if this happens, then the element would be found. So, I am trying to print the value of that variable and at which point it is being found. The point at which it is being found would always be the subscript plus 1, because my array is always going to be starting from the 0th location. That is why it would be the subscript plus 1. And if it is not found, that is the flag variable, if it is not changed, it means that this condition has never met. That means that this key element will not be equal to any of the array elements, that is my search becomes unsuccessful. So, I am saying if not found, this is a logical not operator. So, if it is 0, then I am saying the value is not found and it becomes an unsuccessful search. So, here in this session we have gone through again a recap of what an array is, and also some of the examples by saying which are correct and which are false to have a thorough understanding, and a very few programming examples to understand how and what an array is. Thank you.